What happened in the women's 400-meter hurdles at the Olympics? What was supposed to be an epic showdown turned into an epic beatdown. I'm going to start off by breaking down the race hurdle by hurdle, and at the end, I'm going to tell you what happened. Before I get started, I need to let you know this is the redo of this video. I posted it a few days ago, and it turned into my most explosive video ever. I had almost 20,000 views and over 270 comments in 12 hours. And then YouTube shut it down because of copyright violations. But what I found out through the comments, there's a lot of people who are very passionate about this topic. So I have the advantage of taking all that, thinking it through, and then telling you what I think really happened. So the start to the first hurdle was actually a glimpse of what the whole race was going to be. Sydney was a little fast than she had been at her previous best, and Femke was a little slower than at her previous best. Both of them by 1/10 of a second. At the second hurdle, Sydney was at 9.8 seconds, which was 2/10 faster than her previous best at the Olympic trials. Femke was spot on at 10 seconds with her best time. At the third hurdle, Sydney was still 1/10 of a second faster than her best, and Femke again was equal to her best time. At the fourth hurdle, Sydney was still 1/10 of a second ahead of her best time, but interestingly, so was Femke. So at this point, things are actually looking really good for the duel that we were hoping for. At the fifth hurdle, Femke was still ahead of her best pace at 22.2 seconds, but Sydney was at 22.1, which is 3/10 of a second faster than she was at the Olympic trials at this point. When we get to the sixth hurdle, Sydney, still pouring it on, is 5/10 of a second faster than her best at this point, but Femke, amazingly, is now 3/10 of a second slower than she was at her personal best. At hurdle 7, Sydney was 3/10 of a second ahead of her best, and Femke was 2/10 slower than her best. At hurdle 8, Femke is still 2/10 of a second slower than her best pace, but Sydney is now 6/10 of a second faster than she was previously. At hurdle 9, Sydney's amazing charge continues. Now she's 7/10 of a second faster than her previous best, and Femke is 3/10 of a second slower. At hurdle 10, Sydney is a half a second ahead of her previous best at this time, and sadly, Femke is 8/10 of a second slower than she did at La Chaux de Fonds. To make things worse, we now see Anna Cockrell is caught up to her and is passing her. Now, based on all the comments I got from the original video, I think people's opinions fall into 4 categories. There's a lot of discussion about her taking off too fast in this race, trying to keep up with Sydney and then running out of steam. The other is people think that she might have been fatigued from the amazing leg that she ran in the mixed 4x400 relay days earlier. Some people think that she's just overhyped and she's really not nearly as fast as everybody thinks she is. And there's people that think it's just simpler than that. Sydney is just a superior athlete. I'm going to address all that and tell you what I think happened. First off, she was not going out too fast in this race. If you're paying attention to the touchdown times I was mentioning, you'll see that she wasn't running above her ability level. She was running right at around where she is at this point. And as far as being fatigued from the mixed 4x4, I can somewhat see that point, because I do know that when you run beyond something you've ever done before or at your maximum pace, it can take several days to recover from that. But we also have to remember that was 5 days previous. And within that 5 days, she only had to run the prelims twice, and she was running well under her ability level. So that was more like 2 recovery runs in a 5-day period. So the more I think about it, I don't think that has much to do with this. Do I think she's too hyped? No. And you can see that there's been multiple races where she's running right on with what Sydney's doing. So the numbers don't lie. But the one that I can agree with is what we saw here tells us for sure that at least right now, Sydney is the superior athlete. She's faster, she's stronger, she has more leg speed, and she's definitely more mentally strong. The part that I brought up in the original video is something I want to talk about now, because in my videos, I'm all about teaching young up-and-coming athletes and coaches. I think what we learned here is that amazing athletes, even somebody like Femke Bol, who's one of the greatest ever, is not above psychological challenges. She went into a race with somebody that she's likely pretty intimidated by, and what we saw is her really get psyched out. She was actually running a really good race, some that she could have finished and done really well, possibly PR'd. But instead, when she saw Sydney take off at a pace that she'd never seen before, she melted. Now, it's possible she didn't realize how fast she was going, and maybe she thought she was doing badly and then just sort of gave up. But she really wasn't. She was doing well. The way that she had to throw in an extra step that she never does at the 9th hurdle, and then as slow as she went to the 10th hurdle, that shouldn't have happened, and I think that is all mental. So coaches and athletes, remember that yes, the physical part of the training and racing is incredibly important, but you can't forget the mental part. You have to make sure that you're mentally ready and know what you're getting into, so no matter what, you can cross that finish line having done your very best. Hope this helps. If you want to learn more, I've got lots of videos on this YouTube channel, or if you want to see how I can help you with your running or hurdling, go to acemethodcoaching.com.